I had all the cars I wanted. I had the toys I wanted. I had the places, the girlfriends and everything on the outside looked wonderful, but I was crumbling inside and I couldn't talk to people. And partly because when I was out, I was telling everyone how brilliant things were. So it was, I was showing a different front compared to how I felt. And that was pushing people away as well. I'm Paul Scolfort, and this is Powerful. In this series, I come clean about my own sobriety and the journey it took for me to get here. In each episode, I will speak to a special guest about their addictions and how they achieve sobriety and how they maintain a happy lifestyle today. It's the first week of our launch of the podcast, and the team and I thought it'd be really nice to do a bonus episode. Well, actually, it was Shannon, my producer, said you need to do a bonus episode and talk a little bit about your background, a little bit about yourself, what brought you into recovery, and how you managed to maintain a life today which you enjoy. Honestly, I'm excited to do this. I've got 20 years of experience in recovery and the same before. So I've got a lot to say. Hopefully we'll be able to fit in some stuff that you can relate to and to help inform you about what is addiction through my story and where to go for help. So in some of these episodes, there will be discussions of alcohol misuse, drugs, sexual abuse, suicide, and some other heavy topics. So please take care when listening.
If you were to have introduced yourself, say, 25 years ago, how would you have introduced yourself then?
Oh, good question. Well, it'd been at work, and I would have introduced myself as Paul Scolfort, and I am a male model. And my agent would have said, you need to say a supermodel, which I never liked to say.
You never introduced yourself that way?
No, because it was a label that I was given early on, which was great. Or top model, I think I'd say. But I wouldn't say that in person, just for work.
And so now you meet somebody, and how do you identify yourself? Who is Paul Scolfort today?
I usually say I'm a father of two first. And hopefully, if this is successful, I'll be saying, and a podcaster.
An interviewer who is now in the interviewee hot seat.
Exactly.
How does it feel?
I'm cool with it. But no, I'm looking forward to it, actually, because I don't know what questions you're going to ask. So there's a slight nerves, a little bit. But I love talking about sobriety. I think it's really important for people. The reason why we're doing the podcast is to show people that it can be done. And my sobriety, I believe in anonymity, but my sobriety was put out in the press and stuff. So I'm going to use it as a tool, hopefully to help other people.
And so when did you start experimenting with drinking or using drugs?
It really was, I think it was really fitting in. What I found was that alcohol just took me enough, the first couple of drinks, enough out of myself, I didn't have to feel how I felt. Now, that was totally unconscious. And what I felt before was anxiety, fear, depression maybe, or a bit down or hopeless, and just nervous. I was just like a nervous person. Drinking masked that. You know, it was like wearing a superhero outfit. It always gave me a bit more confidence, a bit more chat.
Right.
And I got used to that quite a lot. So I love honesty and I love conversation. And I really think moving into the fashion business for me was like an awakening. You'd turn up on set, there'd be substances, there'd be champagne everywhere. It would be totally normal for everyone to crack it open at 11 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
So what I found was that was just normal. And where I frowned upon it when I was younger, it was a different kind of drinking. This was more like, felt like it was a bit highbrow. Oh, this is how they do it. You know, there's champagne here and there's drugs there. And it wasn't about, it didn't feel dark. It felt like more of a celebration.
Right.
Oh, we're doing a cool shoot. Everyone's doing their part. So it kind of got embedded with that as well.
Right. Would you say that you started using kind of drugs and alcohol as more of a crutch around that time and using it not just for fun times, or was it still more of a social assistance?
Well, it was definitely social, but in that career, if you're doing well, which I did, your goal is to work every day. And then once you're working every day, your goal is to not work every day and just do big money jobs.
Right.
So that was my goal, was to get to a point where I didn't have to work every day, which I did. And therefore, socializing becomes more frequent.
Right.
But actually, it's just an excuse. It's just the same thing. You're still going out and drinking and using. So it just became part of my life. And it would be abnormal not to. For example, I'd just go and say, I'm having lunch today if I'm not working. I'd go to somewhere, order some oysters or something like that and a bottle of champagne. I think that was totally normal.
Right.
And feel like I've made it. That was kind of part of it as well.
So do you remember any times where you were living in excess and somebody noticed and maybe and you kind of stepped outside of it and noticed, or was it all so normalized?
I think living through the rave scene, then into the 90s, it was probably like the 60s, drugs just become apparent and free and accepted, and it was part of being a higher part of society where people were just drinking in pubs were classed as a lower part, which I don't, that's just as it was. And you was more fun, more game. And then I saw a lot of people that were successful, especially in my business, coming out of nightclubs being photographed at 3 or 4 in the morning, thinking, how do they do that? Then how'd you do that? And then obviously trying, following that path to be the same, basically. I'd been in Mallorca for a week, and we had like this bowl of powder which was supposed to be ecstasy pills, and the girl had put it in a kettle to hide it, and it got wet. So we dried it out, and we would just put it on our cornflakes and coffee in the morning, as you do.
As you do.
And then there was just powder left in this bag, so I just poured it in my coffee, stirred it around, drank the coffee.
Yeah.
Never even questioned what it was. And the next day, I woke up and I couldn't see. I was completely blind for about 2 hours.
Right.
Like literally completely blind. And everyone was still partying. So it's okay, you'll be all right. And I remember sitting on the back of this boat in the port with, it was really hot, and I had a duvet on, and I was fully dressed, and I was freezing, and I couldn't see what was going on. And I just thought I must have took something. I had no idea that I guess I was withdrawing from what I had the day before, and I had a flight that night. So I shouldn't have gone, but I took a flight, went to New York. I remember saying, it was around like 2 hours before we landed, I remember getting a little bit of a chest pain, thinking, oh, that's strange, it's unusual. And I got a really sharp pain and just grabbed the guy next to me. I'm like, I've got chest pains, quick, get someone. And then I woke up in an ambulance going from JFK to the local hospital. And I just remember thinking like I was in a movie, looking out the back doors of this ambulance with this heavy accent New York guy saying, hey, kid, you okay?
Yeah.
Bad accent, but... and just thinking, what happened? Like, what happened? And apparently I'd had like a seizure, and just everything just stopped working. And I was in the hospital for, I think, 3 days. So I missed the job, managed to speak to my agent. And the doctor on the ward was really kind. He said to me, I've read what's in your blood. He said, I don't believe you don't look like a drug addict to me. And he read off the list of stuff, which was not the stuff we bought, in the bag that I took. And he said, I'm not going to report this, but I suggest you don't do any drugs anymore.
Right.
And I said to some close friends, I'm not doing anything again, I'm done.
Right. And that was it? And then?
Well, no, 2 months later, I think I lasted 2 months.
2 months, yep.
And I was like, oh, I'm okay now. That was, don't know what happened really. Kind of put it to the back of my mind, which a lot of people do.
How did you manage to maintain a healthy mindset during that time? So
a healthy mindset, I don't know whether I had it. I was obsessed about working. I was obsessed about, this is my time. I'm going to grab the bull by the horns. I was a person who never sat still. So for me, it was really good. And I think that actually saved me for a long time, because in intermittent periods when seasons slowed down and work slowed down, then I'd party more. But whilst I was working, I was pretty sort of diligent in food, in the gym. And I'd be doing like 8 hours a day, either seeing clients or working for clients. So there wasn't much time to drink all the time, and it didn't have me by then.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I wouldn't go, if we had dinners in Milan, for example, they'd be late at night. I would choose not to drink because I knew that consciously or unconsciously that if I started, that I just wouldn't go to work tomorrow. There'd be no point because I'd want to go out. I wouldn't want to have a glass of wine and stay. I'd actually want to have 5, 6 and whatever else was available. So I would actually not partake. So in doing that, I never thought I had a problem.
When did you kind of prove yourself wrong in a way?
You know what? I think, God, I never realized I had a problem till I went to rehab. But I think that was pure denial. I think that the brain's very smart at gathering evidence what you want.
Yep.
So if you don't want to have a problem, my brain would say, oh, well, he's worse than you. Mm-hmm. Or, well, you stopped that time, you didn't do too much. And you always say no if you go to your parents or you go somewhere else. So clearly there's no problem. Because in my mind, I thought if you had an alcohol problem or a drug problem, that you had to use or drink every day, you had no control, you probably wouldn't have a job by this point, you'd be out on the street by this point.
Right.
So I had no idea that you could function with both. Now I know that the obsession of work, it was part of the alcoholism and addiction, being obsessed by work. Because when you're obsessed by something, you haven't got time to think or look at yourself. You are just absolutely motivated to get the target that you want. So in a way, the success was great, but also it was a double-edged sword because it felt like it was just building up something was going to happen at one point.
Right.
So I generally know that I think it was a point when I went into rehab. We did a process group and they asked me a few questions and I said, I may have a problem with cocaine, but I definitely don't have a drink problem. I can, that definitely not.
Yeah.
And the therapist was very clever at pushing me. Mm-hmm. And I threw my chair back and I went, fuck you, I'm going. And I ran out the gates and I was running to the pub.
Right.
And I just caught myself thinking, if I can have whatever it was, a scotch or some beer, something just to change the way I feel, then I can take what this guy's saying. And at that moment, the penny dropped. It was more like an anvil, but the penny dropped that, oh shit, I need something. And I'm going to take alcohol so that I can take something emotional or mental on board that I need to take on board, and I don't want to do that. So I realized quickly that that's what I've been doing. I've been masking my feelings, whether it's insecurity or loss or whatever. I've been masking all these emotions and feelings for years with alcohol and drugs and obsessive work. I had all the cars I wanted. I had the toys I wanted. I had the places, the girlfriends and everything on the outside looked wonderful, but I was crumbling inside and I couldn't talk to people. And partly because when I was out, I was telling everyone how brilliant things were. So it was, I was showing a different front compared to how I felt. And that was pushing people away as well.
But what about romantic relationships? Because you can kind of do that with friends, but did you have anybody who challenged you? And like, how were your intimate relationships at that time?
I obviously chose some girls that partied and stuff, so it was all part of the package. But I won't mention her name because she's married and has kids now, but it was an ex-girlfriend of mine who we were very close to, had a long-term relationship. And one Christmas Eve, we were in, I forget the name of the hotel, we had the whole top floor of this hotel, basically. We'd been downstairs to the bar, saw our friends, and we was coming up for an early night, say 1 a.m. And I said, oh, hang on a minute, I just got to get something. And as I walked back out of the room, I saw someone I knew. So I just started talking to this person. Anyway, he said, do you want to come in the room? Got a little bit of gear. I was like, yeah, sure, meaning Coke. Yeah. So I thought, yeah, I'll just say hi. Anyway, when I come back to my hotel room, she was on fetal position on the bed, crying. And I said, what's wrong? She goes, you've been gone ages. I said, I've been gone like 20 minutes. Like, it's not that bad. She said, it's 7 o'clock in the morning, Paul. You've gone 6 hours. I had no idea. I had no idea whatsoever. So I felt really bad. I didn't feel bad at the time because I was thinking, don't be so dramatic. I've just been there. But God, that's really, now I'm a sober person. That's awful. If a girl done that to me, it's dreadful. And then the next 2 days, we had to fly to her parents, see her parents, and the pain I was in, emotional pain, I didn't want to be there. I felt like I didn't have the energy to speak to people because of the shame inside. So it's a real energy thing it takes away from you.
So how sober are you now?
Well, I am now, as this comes out, 20 years sober.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And so how is your significant intimate relationship now?
Well, I have lots.
Yes.
As in not lots of wives, but
Yep.
with my wife, it's great. It's really good. You know, sobriety, it was hard work in the beginning, but it was worth everything I've got now, because I don't have any shame or any guilt. I've worked through all the stuff I've had before. Federica, my wife, has anything she can open anything she wants in the house. It's all honest. She's the first girl who's ever had my code for my phone.
Right.
She can have my diary. She can have anything she wants, but nothing to hide. Absolutely zero. And that is something that you can't pay for that freedom. You just can't pay for that freedom. When I was younger, I thought it was really cool to have different numbers in the phone for girls and, talk to people on the side. And whether that's just what you do when you're 20, I don't know. But to grow out of that and to be able to talk honestly, I'll say to my wife sometimes in the morning, I don't feel great today. And she'll be like, why not? And I'm like, I just feel a bit insecure, about this work thing, or I don't feel like I have the energy to speak to this person, or I could have done something better yesterday. And we talk about it over coffee, and in a couple of minutes, I'm fine. It's great to have that. And it's great to have with my children as well, just to be there as dad, be there in the morning. Just to be present with them is the most powerful thing, because I was never present before.
I mean, yeah, I guess we've fast forward through the entire recovery process, which is quite significant. I'm sure it was a few years. It didn't happen overnight.
No. Well, after I ran out the rehab to the pub and came back and realised that they were right and I wasn't, I can't. It's quite much. I was going to take my life, basically. And it's quite sad, really, when I think about it, because I all know my kids now. But I went back to my room and I just sat there on the bed, and I thought I've ruined my life. I spent so much money. I've upset this person, that person, whatever it was. And I've just turned out, I just could not understand how I ended up in rehab, where the journey from a bright young child who was very good at sports ended up in this rehab and all the stuff in between. And I was just done. Wasn't emotional. I was just done. And oddly, the phone rang at that moment. And because you weren't supposed to phone the rooms, you weren't allowed to phone the rooms. And someone had put my friend through, who was in a jolly mood, and he's like, "Hey, how you doing, mate? What's going on?" And it just pulled me out of that space I was at. And I just had like lots of rolling pictures in my mind of my nephews who I cared dearly about, my mum, friends. And I thought the main thing was my mum. I'm like, how can I do this to my mum? I can't do this to my mum. And then I just thought, like, it's really hard to have kids. You must be special if you're here. There's a reason why I'm here. What's that reason? And then I remember two things. They gave us books when we went to rehab, and one had a sentence in the back that said, "You can look the world in the eye." And I thought, when was the last time I looked anyone in the eye? I could tell you what shoes I got on because I look at my feet a lot, and why don't I like looking people in the eye? What's that about? And I just had these, it must have lasted 2 minutes, but all these questions went through. And then someone said downstairs in the process group that the best thing about recovery is that you can wipe the slate clean and you can start fresh. And I thought, God, I'm 33. Can I start fresh? Maybe I can. Maybe I don't have to be a model or anything like I've done before, but maybe I can do something. And it was quite a moment. I just decided, I remember making this decision that, right, I'm going to do this. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to do this recovery thing. And I went back downstairs and probably made an over announcement that I'm in recovery now and I'm going to do it. But it was like sort of being reborn in a way where I wanted to sit at the front of the class, and I wanted to know how I thought, how I tick. Why did I do that? How does this work? And it was really strange. It was like I'd been surfing out to sea, and all of a sudden I realised you got to turn the surfboard the other way and ride the waves in. I know that sounds strange, but that's how I saw it. And I was like, God, now I feel like all I have to do is stay on the surfboard and learn how to surf. And when I went back to a meeting, they took us to 12-step meetings. All of a sudden, everything that people were saying, I started to hear. Before, all I could hear was, well, I'm not like you.
Right.
I don't understand what you're saying. You're different from me. And all of a sudden, I started to hear, oh, yeah, I get that. Oh, I understand that bit. And then I started to realise that these meetings are full of people just like me that have suffered from addiction or alcoholism, and now they're all on the path together. And I just saw it as like an army of people trying to get well. I thought, I'm going to join this group, and I joined the 12-step program. I got a therapist, and I decided not to work for the year. I know a lot of people can't do that, but I was lucky enough to be able to do that. And 4 months in, I joined an acting school. What I found was that the acting specifically helped me with my emotions whilst I was doing therapy and a 12-step program. It was like a perfect storm. So I learned how to deal with my emotions whilst doing this thing. And literally that's all I've done for 1 year.
Wow. All of these complementary therapies in a way.
Yeah, I didn't know that at the time, but after I really realised what it was for.
It's also so interesting to hear about how little of the recovery is not having the drugs and alcohol. I mean, there's everything else. There's the whole life that you focus on, and yes, you're removing these things, but the focus isn't on what you're leaving behind. The focus is on all of the other stuff. So what is life? What is all the other stuff now? Like, how do you is it possible to celebrate without a glass of champagne? Is it possible to, enjoy a sunny day without a beer? Is there a feeling of lack that happens in early recovery?
It's a really good question. And I used to ask that in rehab. I'm like, what about when I'm getting married? What about my birthday? And they're like, when's your birthday? I'm like, in February. It's 6 months away. Don't worry about it yet. I'm like, but what about when I get married? How am I going to, they're like, do you have a girlfriend? No. Well, let's just wait until that happens. So they'd throw the ball down the road, which was actually pretty smart. But you're right. It was my big fear. How do I talk to people? What happens when my friends go in the pub? And to be quite honest, in that first 6 months, I used to have to put my hand up to go past the pub in case the car would go in, because there'd be often times I'd say, I'm just going to go home, and I'd find I'm in the pub. Unconsciously, whether I said I'm just going to see the boys or I'm just going to go and meet someone, or I'll just go over there. There's lots of just going tos. And so someone said to me, can you talk? And I said, what do you mean? Can you have a conversation? Yeah, we're having a conversation. Exactly. So you don't need drink to have a conversation, do you? And I'd be like, let's say, do you? No, I don't, because we're talking. Okay, fine. Have you ever asked a girl out without a drink? I was like, well, only when I was 15. So you've done it? Yeah. So you think it's possible? Well, it's probably uncomfortable. It's possible. Yes, you can do that. Have you ever walked into a restaurant without drinking? Well, yeah, I've been there with my parents. Okay, so you can walk into a restaurant without drinking. So I used to practice things. And I talk about it like when you first learn to drive a car, it's difficult because you get in the car, you have to put the keys in, you have to put your seatbelt on, you start the engine, you make sure the clutch is down, make sure it's in neutral, then you put it in gear, then you check your mirrors and you think, how many things do I have to do before I go? But after a while, that just happens naturally. So that, for me, was what happened in recovery. So when I got married, we had a sober bar and we had a normal bar. And no one cared anyway. It was the same. Now we're really lucky because you've got non-alcoholic beers, you've got non-alcoholic cocktails. There's amazing teas that look like champagne. So I was drinking like a tea that looked like a champagne. So no one knows anyway. It looks the same. It performs the same. It's just myself that I'm happy that I don't have to have that alcohol, you know?
I mean, it just really leads nicely into mindset and how important that is. And I think how important it is to you. Tell me a bit about when mindset became something that you were interested in, something you were learning about, and where you are with it now.
I think since I got sober, I've always been interested in the mind, how you make decisions, how it plays games with yourself, how you can put your own barrier up and you don't need help from anyone else, and how you can talk yourself out of leaving your own house before you actually leave your house because something's going to happen. Think about that. That's all fantasy, all illusion, and you have an emotional reaction to something you think about that hasn't even happened that will stop you from going out and doing something. And also, when I was a boxer, I boxed for the British title 3 times and did really, really well. But one of them, I got winded by somebody and I decided that I'd had enough. Now, had I had a mindset coach or someone older around me just to say, that's just because you're thinking and picturing a negative an outcome, which was I didn't want to get exhausted, they could have just taught me how to be in that moment and just say, you're doing 2 minutes. Just do this 2 minutes. Just go forward. You know you like the excitement. You know you have the energy. We've trained for this. Look at the bigger picture, whatever it may be. And just done stages like that. So I've always been interested in mind and mindset, mentoring guys over the last 20 years to do with alcohol and things. And they'd ask me questions like, I'm going out on a date tonight. It's my first date. What do I do? And I would go back pretty much to what my friend said to me. And I'd say to them, what do you want? And they'd be like, what do you mean, what do I want? Well, I want to take the girl home, or I want to, maybe she's the one I'm going to marry. And I'd say there's so much pressure, isn't it? Because you're going for an outcome. Why don't you go to see who the girl is? Why don't you see if you can make her laugh? Why don't you see if you can have a nice time? Why don't you be stoic and know that you're going to kiss her goodbye at the table or just say goodbye and you'll see her again another time? Would that feel better? And they'd be like, yeah, there's no pressure then, is there? I'm like, what a wonderful night. Go and enjoy it. And they'd always phone me up. So, oh, it was really great. We had fun. We talked about this. I've never done that before. She wasn't freaked out about I don't drink. It was really cool. And I said, how do you feel? I feel great. I said, you feel confident? Yeah. So you don't need to have the drink, right? No. So it's about making things bite-sized and portions and just changing the narrative, because most of us want to go for a date and think that's it. We're going to have the house, the car, and you picture it and you think that's what you should have. So training as a mindset coach was really, it was lovely. We learned different tools. I've learned so much over 20 years anyway, but we learned different tools and techniques of NLP and timeline therapy, which is a really wonderful technique. So I loved it. It was really good.
And now you're working as a mindset coach.
Yes.
And I can see how it would be really helpful for anybody. Tell me a bit about Stride Foundation.
Yes, the wonderful Stride Foundation. My wife and I set it up 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. We set it up because when I went into treatment, and I actually went into treatment for anxiety and depression, before I realised it was drink and drugs that was doing the damage. There's a lot of people who can't afford to have therapy, and there's a lot of people who couldn't afford to have treatment. So our main goal was to try to bridge that gap, do our bit, not save the world, but focus on individuals that we could put into treatment and then help them after. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't about quantity, it was about quality. So that's what we've done. And during the pandemic, a lot of people wanted therapy. They'd be in recovery. Mm-hmm. We've grown a massive circle. It's mostly people in or around recovery that will phone us up and say, look, my uncle's drinking a lot. He wants to go to rehab. Can you help? Or someone at work would say, listen, I'm a bit embarrassed to say, but I've got this problem. Can you help me? And we would help. And from that has developed, we wanted to work at the front end in prevention, because there's lots of kids that are affected by the parents that drink or do drugs. So we wanted to create a school program, which we have. It's really good. We go in and do school talks. We do examples by stories, because kids love stories and you learn a lot by a story. So we story tell. We help with peer pressure. Same thing of how do you do things, how do you ask stuff when you're not cool, or how do you be the vanguard and break away, or whatever it may be. So we do school talk programs as well, which I think we're going to move more and more into it. But Stride Foundation is great. It's been grassroots. We've done golf days, race days to raise money. But our primary purpose is to educate people on, do you have a problem? What is the problem? What's the signs? Can you do something about it? Yes, you can. Where do you go? So we point people into other directions if they need it, or if we can help them, we'll pay for therapy, or like we've got someone in now for treatment at Steps Together, which is our partners that we use, which have lots of beds around the country. And they're a great privately owned rehab that work in trauma or family therapy. And we have lots of therapists that we refer people to. So it's a really lovely little foundation that we're running. We're growing, so we're going to need more money. So we've got a donate page, and we're doing more functions. And we've got Henry Lunn, who's doing he's doing a marathon in Alaska.
Wow.
Like 100-mile marathon. So he's got his donate page up. So we just trying to raise funds to directly pay the people that go into schools to do the talks. And to keep some money for the people that are going into treatment. That's pretty much what Stride is.
It's amazing. It's such an incredible initiative and thing that you and Federica are doing.
Yeah.
Well, just I know we like to wrap these conversations up with how, if you could give any advice to somebody who was struggling or who knew somebody who was struggling with addiction, where would you point them?
Yeah, it's very hard when you know someone who's struggling with addiction, because there can be loyalty issues. But fortunately, we have Google, and you can go online and probably look in your local area if there is any charities like Stride Foundation that can help you, that at least you can send an email and say, listen, this is my situation. What do I do? Is there anything I can do about it? And if you contact us, we'll just email you back and say, yes, these are your options. Or we sometimes take people on ourselves. If it's a person, if you have an inkling that something's wrong, then there probably is. And if you're fed up of waking up not knowing what you've done the night before, or knowing what you've done the night before and just feeling shame and guilt, and know you could do better, know that you'll be better off without alcohol, but you just don't think you can do it, then there's lots of phone numbers, 12-step programs that you can call Frank, you can call us on Stride. There's lots out there now. There's some great information of what to do and where to go. And you can go to treatment centres and have therapy, but you've got to remember that a 12-step program is a group of people that will be doing what you're doing, and it's free, and it's been going since 1938. So it's probably a good place to start, and then you can make your own mind up if that's for you or not for you.
So there's lots of resources out there, but I suppose the big step is making a more internal one.
The biggest step, as my friend said, is the front door step to a rehab, to a meeting or whatever. But actually, it's picking up the phone and asking for help.
Well, thank you so much. There's so many people that will benefit, I think, from hearing you talk and hearing your story.
It's been nice to talk to you, Shannon.
Great talking to you. This doesn't feel like work.
No, it's weird.
It's weird.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for listening. I was slightly nervous before, but it was really nice to tell part of my story, and there's a lot more to tell. So I hope you got something from today's episode. Just take what you need or what you heard that you can relate to and just leave the rest. If you enjoyed this podcast, please glance down at your app, give us a quick 5-star review. No matter where you listen, your feedback comes straight to me and helps the whole podcast more than I can express. This podcast is brought to you by Stride Foundation. If you or someone you know is struggling with addiction, please go to www.stridefoundation.com, where there'll be some great resources and information. Subscribe now so you don't miss an episode, and search for This Is Powerful with me, Paul Scolfer, on YouTube to see all the episodes in video form.